We should have a regimented system in place so when somebody sits in that chair, that we have a reliable result, something that we can depend on, and something that the people who are incarcerated know that if I do X, Y, and Z and I do it well, I have an opportunity to get released. And also the people in the public know that when you get released, you've earned it. So again, I don't see how that's not a win-win for everybody concerned. But unfortunately, if you can get away with telling everybody I'm tough on crime by over-incarcerating people, which, by the way, makes us less safe, then that's what you're going to do. And that's what we suffer from right now.
All righty, kiddos. Welcome in. It's another fantastic week. Your favorite political podcast. It is Alabama Politics This Week with Josh Moon and
David Person. What's up, man?
How are you, David?
I'm hanging tough. How about you?
I feel like we're late doing this. We're like a day late. Usually we record on Wednesdays, and this week we're recording on a Thursday. David was a busy man, because I'd like to hear about some of the stuff that happened yesterday, if we can.
Sure.
With a big time government meeting that went down in Huntsville that went with Catherine Flowers and some of the other folks who were present for the environmental justice, right? Environmental justice meeting.
Well, yeah. As you and Catherine sends her regards, by the way, one of the first things she asked me when we sat down for lunch is, "So Josh is coming, right?" And I was like, "Well," and I had explained to her, what you had going on, and she was like, "Oh, okay." But But
tell her I showed up for her like she showed up on the podcast for us. That's
I'm not going to say that, but she's definitely open to coming back, and
good.
And she was we went into a little detail. I'll fill you in on that. But
good
yeah,
deal. Listen, if I need to, I can pull out the fact that I had to deal with her brother for a long time, so she owes me. So.
Yeah, she mentioned that she learned about you because of JC. So
JC is a character, man. JC and I wrote one good story with Jay. Actually, there were several stories, but it was all encompassing one topic about money being stolen from the use of a facility at Alabama State University by the person who was over it, and JC worked there, and he was one of the people who had his money stolen basically by this person, and JC. That's how I met JC, and then once you meet JC, you never leave JC. I could call him up right now, and it would be he and I would have the same goofy conversations that we would have any other time.
Yeah. He is a memorable person.
He is a memorable person. That's a good way to put it.
So we're talking about Dr. Catherine Flowers, of course, who's been on the podcast before. And since that time, she has gotten an honorary doctorate degree. And she's also become the vice chair of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. And they actually had a historic meeting in Huntsville yesterday. And Josh was supposed to be there, but wasn't able to make it. And we understand that, not a problem. But it was a good meeting. There was a lot of discussion, of course, about environmental justice issues that are occurring around the country. And so this was the committee just kind of doing their usual business. But the part of it that was interesting was they had a public meeting day. And that was the day that I was able to attend and that Josh would have been able to attend. And our friend Coyote, I'm forgetting Coyote's last name, but Coyote from AlabamaAL.com was able to be there, and I think he's got a piece that'll either be out today or maybe later this week about the public meeting, and it seemed Coyote Crown. That's what I couldn't remember Coyote's last name. Really nice fella, good reporter, and I think the committee had robust conversation about some of the issues that communities are facing around the country, And it was informative. I wasn't able to stay for the whole time, Josh, but I was there for a few hours in the morning, and it was a good conversation. Also, Catherine's got a new book that's coming out called Holy Ground, and when we have her come on, we should definitely talk with her about that. It's a collection of essays that some of which are related to her area of expertise that the world knows about, which is climate change and environmental justice issues, and some of it goes into some other areas. It's I've read a lot of it already, and it's a good read. So
yeah. Well, good deal. Good deal. Had I known there was going to be a formal lunch served, I might would have made other plans. But listen, and when I need to tell you too, I was reminded of Catherine's work and the work of the environmental justice group from the White House when I went to visit the folks on the Porch Creek Reservation. They talk a lot about that. As a matter of fact, their sewer systems and things that they've set up to try to help people in their communities. A lot of that work was done because, and they'll flat tell you, the stuff that was happening in the Black Belt scared them to death, and some of the disease and some of the things that have been going on and the way people were having to work and the failures of some of the systems within those communities. They spent a good deal of time and money to avoid that, and so in saying that, it kind of is a decent segue into reminding folks that this program is sponsored by the folks from Porch Creek, the Porch Creek folks, Wind Creek Entertainment, and and we appreciate everything that they do and all of the things they've done for the state and around. We mentioned last week, they're not just the casino folks. They've got a lot of businesses. I guarantee you, somewhere within your general area where you live, they're employing some folks. They're the state's largest hospitality employer, and that's not just because of the resorts in Atmore, Montgomery, and Wetumpka. They also own several hotels around the state, and they also own a number of businesses around this state and have a tremendous influence and bring in just millions and millions of dollars to the state through government contracts. So we really appreciate what they do for us, and which is, hey, we like your program. Here's some money to help you keep it going, and we essentially have no input after that other than say some nice things about us. Just tell people who we are, and so that's basically the best kind of sponsors you can hope for. And man, we really do appreciate them. And and I've told them I appreciate them outside of this as well for a lot of the things that they've done and the way they've been able to help folks and even their own folks on the reservation. It's really a nice thing to see. And we've got some stories that'll be coming out here in the very near future about some of their programs and things that they've done around there. And it's just a remarkable turnaround story. So look forward to that. But thanks to folks from Wind Creek. Listen, look them up online. Wind Creek Entertainment, book a stay at one of their fantastic resorts and go and have a good time. We got Chris England coming up on the program to talk about some of the pre-filed legislation that he's looking at in terms of the parole board and gun legislation and a tax increase on online sales to help some of the local businesses out around here. I think I've mentioned before, and I'll mention to him, I don't know that I necessarily agree with that tax, but we'll talk with him, and maybe he and I can yell at each other or something for a little while, because Chris is so unreasonable, such an unreasonable fellow.
And that's what I was going to say. He's not the yelling type. No, you are, and I am, but he's not.
Yeah. Yeah, no, not at all. But speaking of things we should yell about, Caroleene Dobson. I wrote a column about Caroleene Dobson, and I'm going to say, I think Caroleene Dobson is probably a perfectly nice lady. All right, I think she is smart. I think she is she is well accomplished. She has she's Harvard educated. She has a law degree from Baylor. She has represented some of the country's biggest corporations in litigation and in just general practice. So she has sat in the rooms with some of the most powerful people in our country, and she has held her own. I don't know why Caroleene Dobson's folks have chosen not to highlight any of those attributes for her. Okay, because they have pretty clearly steered away from saying, hey, this is a very accomplished attorney, a smart lady, and she's going to go to Washington and she's going to have some smart ideas about stuff. Instead, they have presented her as this folksy, down home, pickup driving woman who grew up on her family's 5th generation farm, and she learned hard work and work ethic and stuff from this farm that was built over these generations through sweat, love, and determination. And that's fine. It's all fine. It's all fine and dandy. But it leaves out a pretty big part of the story. Okay. And that's what I wrote the column about today. And the big part of that story that it leaves out is the slavery that built it. Because if you trace back Caroleene Dobson's family tree, you arrive at slavery pretty quickly. Some slave owners. There were the Hardys, she's a Hardy that matriculated down into Georgia, and in Georgia they owned one of the largest slave owning plantations that were there. Oh, more than 100 slaves at various times, and we know this through the census numbers that came about because they had to be reported as property, and so we know how many slaves. I think at one point it was 137, which is a tremendous number of slaves working at one location, and then. Some of that family matriculated into Alabama. Why? Well, because they were snapping up land that was being stolen from the Muskogees and the Creeks after the Creek War, and the Andrew Jackson and his Indian Relocation Act that led to the Trail of Tears. They stole thousands of acres of land from them. And then sold it off to white folks for $1.25 an acre, and that's where they ended up with this nice big piece of property in Monroe County, where again there were slaves on this property. All right, there were not very many of them. I want to say there were like 12 or so at the most, but still, we're talking about this, and this is how the generational wealth and that 5th generation cattle farm was founded. All right. That's how it was worked. That's how it became profitable. And then it started to grow and started to make money. And it made money for generation after generation. And they expanded their wealth and they expanded what they bought. They expanded all these things. And they had these opportunities because of the life that they lived. And all of that is fine. Caroleene Dobson, as I said in the column, she's not responsible for any of that any more than any of us are responsible for the idiotic actions of all of our family members. Okay? Especially the drunk ones, as I said. But at the same time, you can't lean into the good attributes of this 5th generation cattle farm and erase the bad attributes and simultaneously talk about eliminating programs like critical race theory, the Department of Education, free learning in schools, and an accurate history being taught, and erase the history that led to you and people like you having these advantages, and so many black folks being thrust into poverty and having a foot on their neck for the entirety of their lives, essentially, because of the laws and the way things were for so many years. Not just slavery, but the Jim Crow that came after it, and and the redlining and all of the things that came along after that, and the way this thing was. And to now pretend as though you arrived at this spot and had these opportunities because of just good old hard work, it's bullshit. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's you had advantages, and it's fine that you had them. You don't owe anybody some portion of your salary because you had them or anything like that. But you do owe it to people to be truthful about what happened and not paint this phony ass picture because it cheapens those other people's lives and their experiences.
So let's flesh this out a little bit, because I think it's really worthy of some serious conversation. So I'm glad you wrote the column, and I'm glad we're talking about it. We both wanted to talk about this today. If I were a white person who had the advantages that she had by virtue of, slavery and Jim Crow segregation. I don't know that I would want to lead a conversation or political campaign with, hey, before we begin, I want y'all to know, I've got a horrible family history.
Right.
I do think though, that what I'd like to think, and I think this may be the point that you're making here, Josh. I would like to think that because of my family history, I would have a different point of view about the topic of race relations.
Yes.
And that I would be, even as a conservative Republican, I would have a different point of view about affirmative action and critical race theory and race relations in general. And I'll tell you somebody that I'm thinking about who I think fits this example perfectly, and that's the late, great Jack Kemp, who was a moderate to conservative Republican, probably very progressive by today's standards, but still a Republican, who had very conservative views on the economy and other traditional kinds of Republican political talking points. But when it came to race, Kemp seemed to be very clear about the reality of race in America, even back when he was sort of in the height of his political activity I think that would be in the 80s, if I remember correctly, late 70s, 80s. And he seemed to be very clear about that and about the need for corrective action. Right. And about the implications of race in America. And that's what sort of positioned him differently than Ronald Reagan, for example, who had the unmitigated gall, the audacity to launch his campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi, his presidential campaign, his 1980 presidential campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi, where the three civil rights workers, Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman, were brutally killed. I mean, Reagan was clearly signaling to not only the white people of Mississippi, but to the people who are now the fathers and grandfathers of today's white nationalists. He was clearly signaling to them, hey, I sympathize with you. Now, I'm not saying Ronald Reagan hated black people. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that I think he was signaling a certain political, I'll say a political connection, a worldview and cultural connection with those people. So I mean, that's kind of how I see the Dobson situation. She should be, I think, a lot more sensitive to the racial history, like a Jack Kemp, and a lot more willing to take a different kind of position than most white conservative Republicans are taking today when it comes to race.
Yeah, I don't disagree with a word of that. And I think I don't, no, I didn't want, I never expected or thought for a second that her or anyone else would fall on a sword and say, listen, look, check out this horrible, thing that my folks did. Right. But at the same time, number one, I don't know why this first of all, this folksy persona has to be presented of her, is her driving around in a pickup, don't you though? Rodeos, huh? Don't you really? Well, yeah, I do. I mean, I know who she's appealing to. That's what I'm saying. Right. But what I don't understand now is why we have this whole mindset on one side of the aisle that says we can't acknowledge anything related to an advantage that was held, when even the dumbest of us can see that there was clearly an advantage that was held by a number of people and a disadvantage held by a number of people. And so I guess what I'm saying is I agree with you in the fact that, well, she should have this different perspective of things. Because there's no way that she doesn't know her family's history of these things. Right. There's no way that she doesn't. If it went back 5 generations, then hell, it went back long enough. If you go back anywhere in 5 generations in Alabama, you're going to hit slaves pretty fast, especially in southern Alabama. Not so much in northern Alabama, but in southern Alabama, yes. I mean, that's where those plantations were and those farms were. And so, so why, as a smart, accomplished person, could she, and not to mention, she's running in a district that is comprised of essentially 50-50. It's 50% black voters, 50% white voters for the most part. I mean, it's a little off from that, but basically that. And so it would seem to behoove your campaign to go in and say, I want to let you know that I understand the racial implications of what happened here and how it has affected my family going forward and the families of so many other people in this county or in this district, and how we differed, how our tracks diverged because of the laws and because of the way things were. And I understand that as well as anybody from the other side of this. And so I'm going to go and make sure that these things don't happen anymore, because I know where I've seen it firsthand. The advantages I had of going to a segregation academy and never interacting with a black person my entire life.
Right.
And so that's what I don't understand. I don't understand why that portion of things was not embraced by her, in any way. It doesn't seem as though it's any way. And because she's made some really dumb comments about race. I mean, she called the Trump verdict essentially a miscarriage of justice, comparable to that of what took place in Brian Stevenson's Just Mercy.
What?
Yes, I mean this is literally, she said this, and I was on a radio show, and that's what I'm saying. Like I know from her accomplishments and what she was able to do, there's no way she's that dumb. There's no way she's that tone deaf of a person. She's been out in the real world. She's been out in a world where she had to interact with other smart people. So that she knows better than these things. She's not a sheltered person that's been living, in some backwoods county for her entire life, and the racism just, festered naturally from birth as it was taught. And so, I don't get it. I don't get that. And to me, it's a disqualifier for somebody to embrace it as she seemingly has. And I don't get it, man. I don't get it.
Well, I think there's just a lot of fear that drives Republican Party thinking these days. I mean, it starts at the top, the fearmonger in chief, former President Trump, and I think permeates that party in ways that we've never seen before. And so I think that's what it is. They really have this fear that I think causes them to grossly underestimate their followers, or maybe I don't know, maybe on the other hand, based on how some of them react, maybe they're not overestimating or underestimating. Maybe they've got it just right. Maybe they do know who some of their followers are, and what some of their sensibilities are, and they have to play to this thing. But I would contend that regardless of whether they're overestimating or underestimating, the reality is, leadership is about just that, leading. Mm-hmm. And it's about taking a stand based on principle. And sometimes leaders have to do that, in opposition to the people that follow them. And I admire those Republicans who have done that. Whether we're talking about Adam Adam Singinger. I've got his. I'm not saying his name right, but
Kinzinger. Yeah, I know you're talking about
Kinzinger. Thank you, Kinzinger, or Mitt Romney, or Liz Cheney. I mean, and while I never thought I'd say this, Liz, not just Liz Cheney, but her father. I mean, these are people that are taking. Yeah, it really is, isn't it? But yeah. I mean, you got to give credit where credit is due. These are people that are taking a principled stance and saying, we're going to put the future of the United States above party. And got to give them credit for that, because the vast majority of the leaders of the Republican Party are not doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. I get so tired of giving people credit for just not being awful. You know what I mean? It just I get so tired of handing out credit for the least awful of the people. You know what I mean? It just God, sometimes it's like Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney hadn't changed. He's still the same person he was. It's just that everybody else has shifted, and he refused to shift. And it's kind of the same way with Liz Cheney. The people shifted on her and she refused to shift. Dick Cheney's still a war criminal. But he's stayed true to his war criminal ways and is not shifting. I don't know. I understand completely what you say, because at this point in time, that now is labeled as courage among Republicans to simply say, wait, what he's saying is stupid. That definitely did not happen. No, the election was not stolen. I mean, to watch these people fumble amongst themselves, to not say that the 2020 election was stolen and that it was a legitimate election is just the height of idiocy to me. Yeah. And I mean, this kind of fits right in with that to me. Is her, I don't know, man. It just is. It's so. I think I called it slimy in the column, and I mean it is. It's a who you're dealing with. You know what these people are facing. You know firsthand because of your experience and what you've talked about with your 5th generation cattle farm, and to not acknowledge it or even worse to me is it's not the fact that she didn't acknowledge, because if she hadn't ever said anything about the 5th generation farm and she just leaned into, hey, I was born and raised here. I grew up. I went to college. I got a degree. I did all these great things. I'm a very accomplished person. If that is the tack she had taken, that would be one thing. But she didn't. She leaned into this. This is the person I am because of my 5th generation cattle farm and the hard work and raising that I got and the morals that I learned from my family. Well, part of that family history is this. And so, what did you learn from that? What did that teach you? And that's the part I hate.
And I think it's legitimate, and I know there's some people who are going to fuss at you for bringing all this up, but it's legitimate because she engaged in classic myth making, so she's trying to create this myth around her family. That means it's fair to examine, well, what is the family history? Yeah. And what you come up with something that is far from classic, aspirational mythology. It's dark. It's dark. Yes. It's dirty, and it's evil.
Yeah, and listen, a lot of us have unflattering family histories. Sure. Okay, I mean, I think I've told mine here before. My grandparents were bootleggers. Or my great grandparents were bootleggers. And hell, for that, most of my family would probably still be bootlegging or something, had it not been for a very fortunate encounter with a Japanese man in which they were able to start a business at exporting mussel shells and lumber from North Alabama, and for a while were essentially responsible for every cultured pearl made in the world, and sold. And so, that turned our family fortunes around. And it saved us. I was able to have opportunities that other people would have never had, because of that. And, I'm not saying we weren't billionaire wealthy like Caroleene Dobson's family and her husband's family, especially with the King Ranch in Texas. But we did okay. We didn't worry about missing meals. We had nice family get-togethers and Christmases and things of that nature that other people didn't experience. And I know this. I know they didn't experience it. I don't apologize for that, but I acknowledge
Correct.
it. I will tell you that we were very, very fortunate to have those opportunities. And I just think that I think that it's disingenuous, and especially when you're running for office in that district and you're wanting to represent those folks in that district who came from the other side of that story. Many people are direct descendants of the other side of that story, and you should acknowledge to me why they ended up with such a raw deal in a lot of cases.
Well, and I think actually, as I sit here and think about it, Josh, the smart play in that district probably would have been to have said, I stand here today as a Republican, who has led who's been able to enjoy a very, privileged life. But I want to tell you that, I have a great deal of sympathy and a great deal even of, I don't know what word, maybe not remorse,
empathy, yeah.
but sort of positioned herself as somebody who regrets that the opportunities that she's been able to face came at such a price for other people. Mm-hmm. and could have really positioned herself as somebody who has such a high level of sensitivity to that, that she believes that would make her an even more effective representative for that area. I mean, she could have played it like that, and that may have been the smart play. It would have been uncharacteristic and unconventional, but I would argue that it might be the play that could have made a difference for her in that. Yeah,
that district is unconventional, especially in Alabama. There's no other competitive district like that, and because you know what,
time will tell, I guess, but know,
right. Well, and I think it gets back to this thing where too often people forget that two things can be true. Mm-hmm. It can be true that your family benefited tremendously from slavery, okay? And it can also be true that your family had a good work ethic, and built the farm and was able to do things because of what you were able, the good fortune and the advantages that you had. You were able to do certain things, and I just think that both of those things can be true in this thing, because there have been a lot of years post-slavery that farm had to survive and make it. And so, I'm sure there was maybe there were some turbulent times. I don't know, but they certainly had to work it, and they certainly had to make it work. And cattle farming, I know from knowing some cattle farmers, is not easy work. And so, and it's often pretty thin margins on that. So I just hate that it's, it's that way. And this is the image that she portrayed, because like I said, from all that I know of her from afar and secondhand, I think she's a pretty decent person. So, all right, we're going to slide out of here. We'll come back in just a minute. It's Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment. Alrighty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person, and we are happy, as always, to have with us Representative Chris England. I always refer to you when you're not here as the smartest man in the Alabama legislature.
And I always tell you that's a low bar.
So, somebody said the other day, "Do you mean that as a backhanded compliment to him?" I didn't. I never thought of it that way. I was like, "Yeah, maybe I'll just say that Chris is a smart guy." And so, but you are, and we wanted to talk to you. You pre-filed some legislation, and we wanted to talk about that and try to just kind of get a gauge on where things stand at this point, because I think there are a couple of things that are very important. And then there was one that I don't say necessarily that we completely disagreed on it, but I just wanted to get a better explanation of the online sales tax portion of this thing, and because you had a bill that's going to support education, and it would raise online sales taxes. With basically the idea being that if you increase the online sales taxes and it helps the brick and mortar folks that are around the state. And my only concern is that I think that there are now, especially post pandemic, there are a lot of local businesses that do that participate in those online sales, and I wanted, just and even chain places, your local Walmarts and other places around. I think that they do that. We order from Walmart and from Publix and from everywhere else, and so I just my concern is that might have a damper on some of the revenue that was being generated by those folks out of a convenience factor. And but I guess, just tell us how things are and if I'm completely off base with all that.
Oh no, I think it's a great point. And first, I'm glad to be here. It's been too long.
Yes, it has. That's our fault.
So I'm glad to be back. This is very good. I mean, this is one of my favorite podcasts, and I like to tell folks that I'm a regular. So
awesome.
Awesome. We like to tell people that too. It makes us seem smarter.
Absolutely.
But the SSUT in and of itself, it's as far as the tax is concerned and how taxes are collected and then distributed, for years, we understood that the general fund was structurally insufficient, meaning that the cost in the general fund would always increase, but the money going into the general fund was static. Mm-hmm. So we always knew going into every session that we would never have enough. Meanwhile, the Education Trust Fund has growth funds in it, sales taxes and so forth. It's always growing. So in order to address that issue, we turn what would normally be a sales tax into a quote unquote use tax. And we call it the simplified seller use tax. So by calling it a use tax, we were able to take growth tax money and steer it away from education and put it into the general fund. So now if you look with the SSUT online sales now, the lion's share of that money goes into the general fund. That's statewide and also locally. Now, why that's relevant is because if I go into a local brick and mortar store and I purchase something, that sales tax would be distributed to a bunch of different things, depending on how your county does it. But a good portion of that money would go to education. Now it doesn't. Now, if you buy something online, it's an 8% sales tax. Half of it off the top goes to the state of Alabama, and the other 4% is distributed 60% to cities, 40% to counties on a population basis. So that means that money that was normally going to education no longer goes there. So one of the goals of that legislation, when I offered to or proposed to increase it from 8 to 9.25, which is like an average across the state, it is to try to backfill education with a lot of the money they're losing off of sales tax through online sales. And if you think about it, if I go to the grocery store and I buy something and I spend that money locally, it goes to the brick and mortar, right? But it also is distributed within that county where that sale occurred. But if you buy it online, that same item that I purchased that's delivered to me, less money, obviously a lower tax rate, but half of it automatically goes to the state of Alabama, and a good portion of that same dollar goes to places that had absolutely nothing to do with the sale. So we are basically cutting off our nose to spite our face in terms of funding education, and you're kind of seeing it across the state where local school boards are trying to figure out different ways to come up with the money they're losing because people are buying more things online. And that's one of those things that I was trying to address. Now, as far as a sales tax concern is increasing it, nobody wants to ever do that, right? But there has to be a larger conversation about how we give education money that they're losing because of the loss of sales tax revenue from brick and mortar stores.
No, I don't disagree with any of that. That was my only concern with it was that we might turn some folks away from some of that. But
and the likelihood though is that it won't. The likelihood of it is that it won't pass. But for me, there's a larger problem. Mm-hmm. In very many counties across the state, they are putting that money into their general fund, and they're not funding education as they once were. There are several counties, and Morgan County was the primary example, that they had a lawsuit, and they basically, local legislation forced a new distribution formula for that money, and now they're sending some of it to education. Some counties have also recognized that there's an inevitability involved in this, and they're cutting deals with their county school boards and the city school boards to give them some of this SSGT money. But there are other counties that haven't. And I'm trying to, through this conversation, convince them that, you need to start contributing a little bit more money. And I'll let it go with this. That fund itself has grown 15 to 20% every year since it's been created. In Tuscaloosa County alone, for example, it started off as a few $100,000 back in 2017, 2018. It is now close to $8 million.
Dang.
That's happening all over because more people find the convenience of shopping online, as you talked about, and it's a little bit cheaper.
Yeah.
Well, sales tax, education trust fund depends on sales tax. If more people are going the online route, that means we're giving less money to education, and it's going to create a massive problem locally, especially. And that's because I have another piece of legislation that we're talking about right now that's trying to create a statewide scheme where either your current formula is grandfathered in, or at some point the state law will kick in and create one for you. So trying to encourage people to take that SSGT money and give it to education. So yeah, man, I talk about more than criminal justice issue.
Well, I mean, but we would also like for you to talk about criminal justice issue because you also have another pre-filed piece of legislation that talks about of the parole oversight, this is pre-filed, but it's also been pre-filed in at least one other session. I've never understood how people get away with two things. One being voting against a citizen oversight board for police.
Right.
Your local police. I never understood how they can get away with it, how local citizens don't go, oh, hell yeah, we're definitely having that. And two, this one here of an oversight board for this agency that is clearly had its problems over the course of the last few years. I mean, I think even the biggest conservative out there would say that the parole board has had a number of issues and they're not following the law. So what has been the pushback on creating the oversight board?
Because the easy answer is just to incarcerate everybody and throw away the key and pretend that we're not creating a crisis that we can't afford to take care of. And, can you imagine having a conversation with a conservative Republican and telling them that there's an element of the government that doesn't have any oversight at all? And they go crazy. Like,
yes.
We created more government for the small government people for oversight of government that is out of control, right? That's what we do on a normal basis. That's what the legislature does. We create more government because we need oversight, because missions and edicts that we created years ago that the government, that our own agencies don't follow, we create more oversight to make them follow them. except here. And, what, is to be celebrated that the parole rate is increased. And not because people look at me like you just want to let everybody out of prison. No, I fully understand that there's some people that need to be incarcerated. I get it. But in order for me to guarantee public safety, I have to have a system that is reliable and repeatable, so I know that this system is actually assessing people to know if you can safely be released or not. Right now, I can't tell you that because the system isn't working. But let me tell you what the lack of oversight has done. And again, I'm not upset about the fact that the parole rates have increased. But the reason they've increased is because of public pressure.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. Meaning that we don't know if the person that's getting out is being properly assessed based upon methodology that we paid for. That's what the guidelines are for.
Mm-hmm.
We have guidelines so we know that you've done something that makes sense and it produces a result. Because when it doesn't work, we know that the guidelines are broken. We need to fix the guidelines. But when it does work, we need to continue doing what's working. Right now, we have no idea because they don't follow them. And to an even worse degree, the chair, Lee Wapney, has admitted in the past to changing them to fit her agenda. So we don't know if what we're doing is working or not. That's why oversight in this situation is necessary. And you would think that I'm asking for something controversial, but it's not. It doesn't take away their ability to make decisions. It just requires them to show their work. So again, we can understand what you're doing. So if there's a problem, we can fix it. If there's not, we can help you do it better. But when you tell me that the reason why parole rates have increased is because stories in the media has shamed them into operating correctly or more, or in a way that makes sense, it should scare everyone. That's why oversight is needed. And by the way, whether or not you get paroled shouldn't be because of the personality or the conflicts of the membership of the board itself. We should have a regimented system in place so when somebody sits in that chair, that we have a reliable result, something that we can depend on, and something that the people who are incarcerated know that if I do X, Y, and Z and I do it well, I have an opportunity to get released. And also the people in the public know that when you get released, you've earned it. So again, I don't see how that's not a win-win for everybody concerned. But unfortunately, if you can get away with telling everybody I'm tough on crime by over-incarcerating people, which, by the way, makes us less safe, then that's what you're going to do. And that's what we suffer from right now.
I think you've laid it out very well, Chris. I want to stay in the realm of criminal justice here for a second. You also pre-filed a bill called HB 42. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Tell me, I don't my numbers. I got some.
Oh, okay. This is your
struggling.
bill that allows people to circumvent the bail bonds system and to pay only a percentage of bail.
Yeah. That's a really so forever, we've allowed judges to do percentage bonds when it comes to assessing someone's ability to pay, A, but B, whether or not they need to be out, right? So if you're charged with a misdemeanor offense and the bond is $1,000 or it's $10,000, a judge could say, okay, you're going to put up a percent of that in cash. That money goes directly to the court system. And in the event you don't reappear or you don't come back, we forfeit that money. We take that money and we use it to pay fines, court costs, restitution. So it benefits the accused. It also benefits the court system and it benefits victims. Well, 2 years ago, the industry, the bail bonding industry, got a hold of the legislation, changed 2 words, took percentage out, and now everybody in the state, when they get arrested, has to go get a bondsman. Now, think about how terrible that is. Because that means that instead of that money going to the court system, you then have to give it to a bondsman.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But also, and how can I put this diplomatically? That hasn't been the best industry going forward over the last few years in terms of operating in a very honorable way. Let's put it that way. Okay. We've had issues with dealing with bonding companies in the past where we've had bonding companies who've exchanged releases from prison or from jail for sex. We've had some who've taken less than a percentage and effectively lowered bonds. We've had co-defendants bonding each other out. I mean, it's been a mess. Okay. And by the way, whenever we try to forfeit against them when they don't produce the accused, they come to court and they say, if you make us pay, you'll put us out of business. Or we've got some that have gone so far as to sue the state to keep us from being able to forfeit bonds. So what that bill does, it just simply puts us back where we were for the last 30 to 40 years, where judges have the authority to give percentage bonds, and then also benefits the court system, benefits the prosecutor, benefits the accused, benefits the defense, and helps us keep that money in the court system rather than give it to somebody who's at most points, and I'm not talking about all of them, but some who are really just exploiting people at their worst points.
So I am aware of the fact that there have been some, in addition to what you mentioned, I've certainly heard about people who've been outright scammed by either, I don't know if they were bonding companies or people pretending to be bonding companies, but who have apparently been scammed, to some significant degree. Yeah. But I've also heard of, pardon me, and even seen examples of bail bondsmen who seem to be trying to do the right thing, not only in terms of just conducting themselves ethically as it relates to the job, generally speaking, but who end up doing a whole lot of casework. Right. It's almost like they're social workers, in some cases even, helping people who seem to have generational issues as well as perennial issues with addiction and other things. And I wonder, I guess my question is, if some of these people are able to circumvent the bail bondsmen who are in effect doing casework along with their bonds work, what's going to happen to those people? And is the system ultimately going to be better served by these people being sort of out of the system and out of that last layer of supervision and support that they were getting?
That's a great question. And up until 2 years ago, this wasn't an issue. And honestly, the bonding system has been operating as normal for the last 20, 30 years. And there's always been that balance between what the court system is capable of handling and doing in terms of accepting cash bonds versus also, as the more serious crimes occur and the higher bond amounts are demanded, where you absolutely have to use a bonding agency to get out. Most of the cases that we're talking about in terms of cash bonds or percentage bonds would be your lower level offenses with a smaller bond. But the higher amounts you get will be those individuals who are charged with more serious offenses that will absolutely benefit from what you're talking about. And those folks will still be getting bonds. This is what happened legislatively with the change in what we were doing. It's just more or less a matter of greed to make sure that they got all the cases, including those with misdemeanors, smaller misdemeanors with lower bond amounts versus just the cases where somebody who absolutely couldn't afford to get out without a bondsman, which are the more serious offenses. So this small change won't change what you're talking about, but it'll also make sure that people who are charged with misdemeanor offenses, the judges and low level of felony offenses, judges have the ability to say, okay, here's a cash bond amount. How much can you make, and help you get out? Versus people who have more serious offenses who need the help that you're talking about, the supervision that you're talking about, will likely end up getting a bondsman anyway. Because again, what I'm talking about doing or changing is restoring back what we were doing just a couple of years ago. And no one has ever complained about bondsmen not having enough business, because they do, because we arrest people all the time. But at the same time, no one's ever complained about the fact that judges can give percentage bonds. What they did was snuck right there comfortably in the middle between two extremes and got a little greedy trying to get all the business. But when you do that, you also sacrifice our ability to pay for certain things and justice itself when it comes to dealing with the accused.
We had. Go ahead, Doug. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My only follow up was going to be, and I don't claim to know the answer to this. Maybe you do, Chris. How does the bill impact the facet of the bonding industry that has to do recovery, and how will the court system be impacted by that? I guess, in other words, do you think that it'll be more challenging to get those people who do jump, and skip? I'm sorry, not jump, but skip bail and skip town to try to evade prosecution? Do you think it'll weaken that part of it, or have you taken that into account?
Oh no, it won't, because again, this is how we've been operating for years, and oftentimes the court system will find those who are missing from court because they'll have a warrants issued for other reasons. So a lot of times people who are out on bond, who are supposed to be under the supervision of a bondsman, they actually won't find the person until they're arrested and come back to court for something else. So the court system and law enforcement oftentimes handle the responsibility of bonding companies anyway. But at the same time, again, I just want to stress, this is not like a revolutionary change in what we're doing. Is because we've already been doing it for years. In those terms, I don't think it will have much of an impact at all. We'll actually just kind of operate as we always have.
Okay.
Yeah, we had Montgomery County DA Darrell Bailey on here a while back talking about some of the issues that were going on in Montgomery, and while he was here, he just happened to toss out the fact that he's all for doing away with the cash bond system in total. He doesn't think it's a very fair process. He said, as far as he can tell, there's no public safety portion of this. Basically, he says there's no impact on public safety by saying that I'm keeping two people. He said if I have two people who commit the same crime, and one person can pay the bond and the other person can't pay the bond, how has that impacted public safety in any way, shape, or form? Essentially, and so I mean, should we look at some sort of overhaul? And that, I know this is not related to your bill at all, but it just made me think of it when we were having this discussion about some of the problems that are there with this, and the way people have been taken advantage of in different ways, and the way some folks who just simply can't make the bail are having to live in a jail, in a county jail somewhere for a period of time. They lose their jobs, they lose their ability to earn a living, they all sorts of different things, just simply because they couldn't make the bail that was set when somebody with means could make it and have gone on about their lives, basically. So, I mean, should we not look at something that changes it more substantially?
Well, there are certain states that don't have bondsmen at all. The court system manages it completely. So but I think most people forget that bond is supposed to be to guarantee your return to court. That's the fundamental purpose of it. We started mixing in public safety as a reason to hold people and deny them bond, but the whole purpose is to guarantee you to return to court. But the inequities that you have identified are endemic to the system all the way across the board, from investigation to arrest to prosecution to sentencing to whether or not you get paroled. It's just unfortunately a element of our system that, these inequities that continue to persist also persist in who gets arrested, who doesn't, how they get bond, how much the bond is, whether or not they can pay it. And essentially, unfortunately, justice system, you have an alternate track of justice depending on how much resources or resource you have, how much money you have, which makes it even more likely for you to either get a favorable treatment or out of jail faster. I mean, it's just unfortunately a part of the system. So when you talk about just an overhaul of the bonding system, I think that is just a symptom of a larger problem, that the inequities that we suffer from just permeate throughout the system, and it just spits out results that we can't understand, can't explain, but also can't get rid of because it's like just kind of baked in. And we talk about this stuff. I talk about this stuff all the time. That the system itself is funded off of the backs of the people that are prosecuted. Well, oftentimes the people that we prosecute are also, there's a reason that they're in crisis, right? Because they don't have resources. It's because they live in poverty or something like that. So we depend on funding the system off the people who can't pay it. So what does that do? We end up shifting the burden to the people who can, which is why when somebody with means gets arrested for a DUI and they're trying to keep it off of their record, the charges for those folks are extraordinary because they can pay. So, I mean, our system is just completely screwed up. It absolutely is.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. But listen, at least we've got you working, in there, and seriously, I mean, you know what's going on, and you have these discussions, and it's kind of like the grocery tax. If we keep bringing it up for 25 years, eventually somebody on the other side will say, "Hey, that might not be a bad idea."
Eventually.
And yeah, eventually. And I think that some of these ideas will hit as well. And, and maybe as we go along and more smart things are said out loud, people will aspire to that. But we shall see. But hey, thanks for spending some time with us and going over this, and for just the general work you do.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I just want to make sure because people see these things, and I want to make sure people understand that there is progress being made with some of our criminal justice issues. Obviously, you've seen the parole rates increase, but I think public pressure has increased, even as a small amount, how responsive the Department of Corrections has been to some of the crises and tragedies that are happening within the system too. We created a new position legislatively that's supposed to increase constituent services. So people who, I know you've talked to them about how they can't find out what's going on with their family members, how they're sick or they're being assaulted or they're being exploited or being taken advantage of. We're working to create a system that is more responsive to those folks. And to this point, it's starting to work a little bit. The Department of Corrections is a tough nut to crack, as you know. Again, to put it diplomatically, they're not the most transparent. They're not the most responded. Probably don't have the best leadership and never have enough money to deal with some of the issues that they have. So it takes pressure from all quadrants. But public pressure has changed so much over the last few years. And I want to just implore your listeners to keep it up. The more pressure you apply, the more response you'll get. Some of our colleagues like to go to Montgomery and pretend it's in another place, it's in another state. But as long as you continue to keep that pressure on, you will continue to see changes, even if they're incremental, in our system. So keep the pressure up. I know we got aspirational goals to get rid of certain things, but the realistic goals that we're meeting all the time come as a direct result of people putting pressure on the system. So keep it up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right, and we're going to do everything we can to encourage them to do that on this issue and on others as well. Because you're right, that pressure and people paying attention is the only thing that seems to matter. There's sometimes I worry that we're losing shame, and shame doesn't matter as much anymore. But it still works for some folks, and with enough to get some things done. And we appreciate you being kind of the tip of the spear on a lot of that. And so, just thanks for the work that you've done and continue to do, and for spending time with us. We really do appreciate it.
Oh yeah, anytime. Like I said, once a month, I'll be here. Just let me know. Just let me know what time.
All right. We're gonna probably hold you to that. So it's all right. That
you might lose some viewers though.
Oh no, there's no chance of that, man. There's only the dumb ones, and anyway, so that's all right. So yeah, all right. Well, that's Representative Chris England. We appreciate him spending some time. We're gonna slide out Alabama politics this week. We're back in a minute. Alrighty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment. We'd like to thank the good folks at Wind Creek for sponsoring, and the folks at Southern Poverty Law Center for doing the same, and all the folks for listening, and for Chris England for spending some time with us. I'm gonna throw one at you real quick before we get into our right wing nut and the discussion we were going to have there that I'd forgotten about, but I just thought of. And it's kind of back to Caroleene Dobson and the Shamari Figures race. And I wanted to point this out because I criticized obviously Caroleene Dobson and her campaign for the way they portrayed her, but also I would like to offer a little bit of praise to her as well for, I believe it was last week or maybe the week before. She said publicly that she was encouraging Governor Kay Ivey to look at Medicaid expansion and explore it for the state. And she thought it would be a big benefit to the state. And what I want to talk about with that is, or what I wanted to say is, this is the benefit of competitive political races, general elections, okay? Because there is no chance. You didn't hear Caroleene Dobson say this in the Republican primary. All right. She didn't talk about expanding Medicaid in the Republican primary. She never brought it up. All right. She never brought up this access to healthcare thing in the Republican primary. But as soon as she gets into the general, where we're in a 50-50 district all of a sudden, and and she may have a chance to win if she can lure over these the moderate Republicans or the more conservative Democrats or whatever who are unfamiliar with Shamari Figures, or who may just not like some of his policies or whatever. Now all of a sudden she's paying attention to those people, and she's listening to what they're saying, and they're talking about their lack of access to health care here and how it's a real concern for them. And she wants to be elected to that seat. And so when now all of a sudden you've got a majority of people over here saying, hey, I would like for you to pay attention to this topic that's really important to me. And if you do so, I might be more inclined to vote for you. And it works on both sides of the aisle. All right. It would work the same in Terry Sewell's district as well. Okay, if the district was a little more even over there, and I don't know what I like Terry. I think that she does a really good job of addressing pretty much everybody's issues over there and addressing the issues of that district. But maybe there's some more conservative things, because I think the same thing has happened with Shamari on a number of topics, and he's had to go into some homes where he in a more gerrymandered district would not necessarily have to go into. And talk to people about issues and topics that he wouldn't necessarily, whether it be farming, whether it be, whatever the, immigration, whatever the conservative topic is, I'm sure he's had to go in and talk to people and come up with a policy idea and a plan to address those issues. That's what having non-gerrymandered districts does for your races. All right. It forces these people to pay attention to the topics that matter to you most.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. No, I think you make a good point, and I think it, and I want to give her credit also for. I remember seeing that and kind of thinking to myself, that's interesting. I didn't know quite what the impetus was for that coming up at that particular point in time. I don't know if it came from a reporter's question or if that was already part of her talking points planned for the day, but I'm glad she said it. I wish she'd said it, quite honestly, with a little more oomph. I wish she had really not said like for her to consider, but just made it clear that she has to. Yeah. And I think the case to be made is pretty clear, and we've talked about it on this podcast. Rural hospitals are suffering, and there's only one, and rural hospitals are serving everybody. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican, black, white, liberal, conservative. They serve everybody. Yeah. And the demise of rural hospitals is a real issue in this state. And we're also having problems as APR, our affiliate news organization, has covered, with dentists in this state being able to stay in business. So we've got reasons for advocating for Medicaid expansion, whether you're a liberal Democrat or a conservative Republican. I think she should have been more forceful about it. But nonetheless, as you pointed out, Josh, she raised it. It's good she raised it. And I think you're also right that, being in that district kind of forced her to try to find a point of commonality with a significant portion of that district. And that's a good thing.
Oh, I think it's absolutely, yeah. I just wish that we would go to a system, not just in this state, but all over the country, in which we stopped dividing up districts and allowing the politicians who benefit from the division of districts, to have a say in the process. Not just to say, but hell, to create the process. That to me is so counterproductive. It's essentially allowing the people to pick their voters instead of vice versa, in my mind. And I don't care if it's Democrats, Republicans, Independents, whatever. You put somebody up there and you say to them, here, draw out the district that you want to draw. Most every person is going to draw out a district that's more beneficial to them. And that's just the way that it is. And so I don't understand why we can't pass a national law that mandates that there is a process by which we do this that is nonpartisan, that brings in a group of people and computers and everything else and divides this thing up in an equal manner. And if we would just do that, we would have so much better representation, and we would have so much better government all the time, and a responsive government. I mean, that's just the way that it is. That you look at it right now. Your best look at Doug Jones, for example. I mean, Doug Jones wanted to keep his Senate seat, and I mean that dude. He was going to be great anyway. But he was ultra responsive to everybody during that time because, he needed it. He needed to appease people to make sure that he was going to hang on to the seat. And it just is. I don't understand why people can't see that. I really don't. Anyways. All right, let's go the right way.
The people that have power want to keep it and grow it. And then, of course, we have these outliers, people like Trump and of people of his ilk who really just want to control everything. And that's pretty obvious from the kinds of authoritarian things he's saying. But anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. I mean, at a point when you start talking about this, or to me anyways, when you start talking about it, you get more and more wound up. And then at some point you realize I'm just banging my head against the wall here. So, it's, that's why the abrupt stop, I think, from both of us. Yeah, anyway, it's like, it's like talking to the kid, Well, it's like, y'all have these long conversations with Andy at some point, and at the end of it, she'll say, Dave, could you turn the TV on now? So, it's just, just, you know what I mean? It's just like nothing that I said. But at some point in there, she stopped listening and the eyes glazed over or whatever. But, so anyway, we need to get to the right wing nut and get ourselves out of here because we've gone way too long with y'all. So our right wing nut is Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is the right wingiest of the right wingiest nuts. And her nonsense over people being able to control the weather and doubling down on it a couple of different times with her insistence on these, when she listed the the number of patents for weather systems and it's so dumb, man. It's so stupid. I mean, it's the same group of people now, mind you, who have said for years that humans have no effect on weather. And now all of a sudden, not only do they have an effect on the weather, they're actually controlling it and sending hurricanes to specific locations to affect, the right-wing voters only. Apparently, they've forgotten that North Carolina is leaning Democrat, and I believe has a Democratic governor. And so, man, it just, I don't understand when we decided to be stupid, or so many people, anyways. Because I mean, it's a choice at this point, right? I mean, it is. It's a choice at this point because we're talking about, we have the most technology ever. We have access to information, accurate, good information. More so than at any point in human history, okay? And for some reason, we have chosen to be the dumbest that we can possibly be. I mean, over the last few weeks, first of all, James Spann, Alabama's weather guy, has had to delete a couple of posts because, he just simply shared facts from FEMA about what was and wasn't happening on the ground in North Carolina. He was inundated with people who apparently had watched some crazy TikTok and believed that liberals were hiding the moon because they didn't understand how lunar phases worked. The moon had disappeared. So... Yes, this is true. He put this on. He posted this the other day that he had been sent several messages from people that were convinced that the moon was being hidden in some super secret. I don't know what I don't know what they were hiding it for, why they were hiding it, but they were hiding it. And I mean, it just and what I tell you what, the only thing that irritates me about Spann and his stuff is he pretends that it's just politics, and not these right-wing goobers over here, okay? I mean, that's what, it's not politics. It's right-wingers. It's the nuts out here. Same people that were showing up to the pizza parlor because they thought something was happening in the basement with there was pedophiles in the basement that didn't exist. The basement didn't exist, and it's just all the time with these people. And, the internet has made it more possible, and social media especially, has made it more possible for these nutcases to get together and congregate around their idiotic ideas. I mean, now there's legitimately a flat earth movement, of people who believe that the earth is flat. And that all the pictures from NASA are doctored. And it just, I don't understand what happened.
Well, the the truth, as I understand it, some of the flat Earth people and some of the we never went to the moon people are liberals. So I mean, I think there's a certain sort of streak of idiocy that defies, I'll say, partisan description. But here's the thing. I think what it goes to, Josh, is there's a general, I think, and what was the trigger of this? Some would say Watergate back in 1972, or maybe even something before that. But there is a certain percentage of the population that has a deep distrust of government and authority. And you're going to find some on the left that way. You're going to find some on the right that way. But I think what we're talking about today is something that has real life implications. People that don't believe that the earth is round, who may be liberals, or people that believe that NASA never went to the moon, who may be liberals, they are not causing harm. They're not putting lives in danger. But people who believe that there's some kind of government conspiracy related to hurricanes and FEMA providing resources to people in need, those are the kinds of conspiracy theories and ridiculous speculations that really do cause harm and undermine not only confidence in government at a time where government relying on government help is essential. But I think it also undermines the ability of government to be as effective as it can be in terms of serving people, and also undermines the willingness of people to follow essential directives from government when it comes to being safe. Yeah. And that, I think, is where the problem is with Marjorie Taylor Greene and her asinine speculations about government controlling the weather and hurricanes being some kind of a liberal plot or whatever the heck she's saying.
Yeah. No, I think you're right about that. You're definitely right. And, it's also striking, to watch the people who have, for years when scientists have said, listen, if we don't do something about climate change, the waters of the oceans are going to start to heat. We're going to melt some of the ice cap. We're going to have some flooding. We're going to have some severe flooding issues. We're going to have, these super intensified storms that are going to be weird. They're going to come from different directions. We're going to cause droughts. We're going to cause flash floods literally all of these things have been said. To the specific. Even up to the flash flood things after hurricanes, and which is what happened in North Carolina. And they said all these things. And as they were saying them, you had these people on the right who continued to say, oh, you're crazy. The weather always changes. And either they were genuine in the belief of that, or they were doing so as bootlickers for, the coal industry or for whatever, and they did it because it was beneficial personally to them. And so, but here we are now, and there is a massive problem with superstorms. Now we've had a couple, very weird one going west to east to hit the west coast of Florida. And now instead of acknowledging, hey, those scientists might have been right about this, and that hot water in the Gulf is causing some problems. It's the libs are controlling the weather.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Well, it's like you said, it's stupid, and she is, what do you say about her? She just, every time she opens her mouth, it seems like something really ridiculous comes out, and as long as her people keep electing her, I guess we're stuck with her in Congress, even though apparently she sits on no committees. No. I'm assuming that's still the case. They took her committees from her at one point, so she was just kind of up there doing God knows what.
She said something, remember, because she had that confrontation with the representative from Texas.
Jasmine Crockett. She called it a bleach blonde, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Yeah, I've forgotten about that. That's true. Well, maybe maybe some of her responsibilities have been restored or all of them. But I know at one point they were taken away because even her own party was fed up with her.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's, so much of it has now become a show, and representation wise in Congress, especially, it's just become a show. And they get rewarded for idiotic behavior by those folks. And that's right across the line in Rome, Georgia, where she represents, and it's just, I don't understand why those people would elect such a person, or why anybody would, for that matter.
Is she the one? I think I get her confused with Lauren. I think it's Lauren Boebert. I think.
Uh-huh.
Which one of them is the one who was supposedly giving a male companion some digital gratification in a theater?
It was
Who
Boebert.
was that?
That was when she got kicked out of the. Was it Beetlejuice? Beetlejuice the musical? I believe she got kicked out of.
Okay, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was Boebert.
Okay,
yeah.
So that was. It
is tough to keep them separated and keep it all straight.
They kind of fused it for whatever reason. I confused them. I don't know why. Okay.
Well, they share the same brain, so it should be. No, listen. It just. I don't know, man. Honestly, the idiocy is worrying me a little bit, and I think I'm just going to stay. We've got a new thing here at our house where it was not necessarily all that new, but the little one has started playing softball, and so I think I'm just going to hang at the ball fields. And there's just enough craziness at the ball field with just enough wholesomeness to get you through the day. It's enough entertainment, enough craziness, enough wholesomeness. And then you go home and you go to bed. And I think that's just what I'm going to start doing. That's all I'm going to pay attention to from now on. She won her little team won their 6-year-old championship the other day.
All right, very good.
Yeah, it was. She was so excited. She dances with the trophy still. So it's But anyways, that's look. I suggest y'all do the same. Find a kid, take them to the ballpark, and enjoy life. And pay less attention to the idiots out there, because we're losing it. We're losing it bad at this point. So till next week, man. Y'all be safe out there.